Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. Today, we're taking on the most sacred question in any marriage. Should I stop being an a-hole right now and save my marriage?
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Seth Nelson, and I am so excited today because we have Brian Ronalds on. And Pete, you've just got to tell everyone about Brian because I am not going to do this justice, especially with should I stop being an a-hole?
You could try. Brian Ronalds is an actor turned writer, producer, director, and he's precisely half of the Ronalds Brothers. You can see Brian in the horror comedy Netherbeast Incorporated, directed by his brother Dean, and in many other credits, which do not include why he's here today. He joins us as author of 2 books designed to guide you through your marriage, assuming you don't actually want it to end. How Not to Be an A-Hole Husband and Lose Your Wife, and its partner, How Not to Be an A-Hole Wife and Lose Your Husband. Welcome, Brian Ronalds, to the Toaster.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, fellas.
Seth, you read the book last night.
Oh, yes. Read the book, skimmed. And when I say read the book, it's How Not to Be an A-Hole Husband and Lose Your Wife. So read that in its entirety. Also started skimming the How Not to Be an A-Hole Wife and Lose Your Husband, though I have not finished that one. But I thought the How Not to Be an A-Hole Husband and Lose Your Wife just had some brilliant advice. And I'm a little annoyed at Brian that he didn't write that book back in 2001 and 2 and 3 when I was married for the very short 3 years of my marriage, which, as my girlfriend who was married for 15 years says, 3 years is not a marriage. It is a long weekend.
Well,
pretty much.
Did you find it resonate, Seth? Did you find he's speaking gospel to you? This is like, we should say, it's a very approachable book. You open the book and it's like the Jonathan Livingston Seagull for the wisdom of you don't want to be an a-hole divorce.
Well, Brian, how would you describe your book? You've been asked this question, I'm sure, before.
I would describe a book as a ridiculously easy 30-day guide. In today's day and age with Twitter, only allowing a certain amount of characters within a given post. I thought, our attention spans are being cut down. So I wanted to do just that and do 30 days. And basically it's 2 pages a day to read through with some eye-opening words of encouragement and recommendations on, how to, look yourself in the mirror and see if you're doing a good job as a man and a husband.
It's as I'm reading it yesterday, I'm thinking to myself, it's a special sort of transformation that takes a guy from, I got divorced and my life is torn asunder to, I think I'm going to write a book about all the crap I did wrong. Let's talk about that, Brian. How did you get into the space to write this book?
So I was married for 17 years, which is longer than a long weekend. It's more of a vacation that got turned into a nightmare. But to answer your question, reflecting and looking back on how things I could have done differently is what had me engage myself to actually putting a pen to paper and writing some advice so other men don't have to fall into the trap of what I did. And I wouldn't even call it a trap. It's just becoming a better human being all the way around. And I was working a lot in the movie business. I brought my work home quite a bit. And I would say the biggest takeaway for me amongst all the other chapters that I have is just, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And the way I said things, and still keep myself in check was a way that I find inappropriate, and probably most people would. There was name calling. I was not kind. I was not loving. And it seemed to push my better half away into the point where before I knew it, she was checked out 3 years ago before I even knew what the hell was going on.
Look at that, Pete. 3 years.
Look at that.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, Brian, the reason I'm saying is in one of our shows, and I've read studies on this, it takes about 3 years for someone to first think they want a divorce until it actually happens. And here you are talking about your experience, and you're like, wow, it was 3 years checked out. So, but, to your credit, Brian, I found it very impressive that you took the time to be self-reflective, because in the book about not being an a-hole husband, okay, it's all about the mistakes that you believe you made in that relationship. And for someone to be post-divorce, to take the time to write that and to be very self-inflected to help others, I think is phenomenal. And I don't think the book is just if you're currently married. I think if you're already divorced, this might be, hey, what went wrong and what can I do better next time, or in the relationship that I'm currently in? So I found that to be just kudos to you, and thank you for putting it out there.
Thank you.
I think that's I want to pivot on that question, because I think it's really important. We talk a lot about the work that you have to do and own in the process of going through the divorce experience. At what point do you realize, as you're going through this and you realize your marriage is on a decline, that there is work for you to do, to take ownership and to start doing the heavy lifting, sort of inside, to know that you're on a track to be the guy that you want to be in a relationship?
Well, I panicked because I thought this was the person that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. We've been through some stuff like any other normal relationship would go through. So I thought that our marriage was, you couldn't touch it. We like I said, we had gone through a lot of stuff, but at the same point, what I didn't know is that my wife at the time was overlapping our marriage with another man. So that kind of threw that into there. And then I thought, okay, so I've done wrong. You've done wrong. Let's fix this. And so we started going to therapy. But little did I know that I was going to therapy on how to deal with the divorce. I thought I was going to therapy on how to make the marriage better.
Right.
So we were both going to the same therapist, but I thought
two different reasons.
For two different reasons.
Right. And I will tell you, the therapist I've always talked to that said, if you're going to therapy, the very first thing is someone already checked out? Because if, as you said, if they're checked out, that relationship's done.
Yeah, and women and women want, and humans, once someone checks out, they're done. There's nothing you can say.
It's not just on women; it's both sides, either side.
Exactly, humans in general. Yeah. And we've been divorced for 7 years now, I believe, and she admits now that she regrets everything, and then she wished she would have stuck, with the marriage, on how her life path took her. But she's doing great now. But you're right. If somebody is checked out, it's really hard to come back from.
You say something early in the book, crazy epidemic we're facing nowadays. Husbands are sticking around in their marriages while women are slamming the doors with middle fingers in the air, never to turn back again. What the hell is going on? And I'm curious on both your perspectives. One, Brian, how do you arrive at that? What do you think allows us to arrive at that trend? And Seth, is that what you're seeing in the people who come to you for divorce?
Yeah. So when she left, she had already made up her mind. And there was nothing I could say or do. It was basically like, again, middle finger in the air, the door is slammed, get ready for a divorce. Here it comes.
In what I see, Pete, and this is historical, I think, in nature, is back in the 50s, right? The guy would be the one to leave. A woman would never, very, very rarely leave. And divorce was very infrequent. Okay. And the laws were dramatically different back then. Basically, the women would raise the children and get the children, and the dad or the husband would be not really a parent anymore. And then there'd be all these financial deals that had to be paid. Okay. Much different now across the country. This is where I'm always the lawyer, checking your local jurisdiction and talk to a lawyer licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. It is just dramatically a different landscape. Also, the historical women would go to college to meet a man. That is not why women go to college today. There are more women in law school than there are men. So there is just a different dynamic when it comes to finances. So I think that changes the dynamic. But I see women leaving men. I see men leaving women. And now in our same-sex marriages, men are leaving men and women are leaving women. So I see it across the board. There is not one reason why people get divorced. People think the guy always cheats. I have it where women have been the one who have cheated. People think that, oh my God, what's wrong with that person because they've cheated? But my question is, well, how did it get to that point? How did it get to that someone's cheating? And if you read Brian's book, this is a way to talk about to prevent things like that from happening. Like, for example, I just thought it's day 6 in his book, which is listen, 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 which basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, Brian, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically says when you first started dating, you would hang on every word. And now that you're married, you get home, you do this, you don't really ever listen. You're on your phones. We're all addicted to those. Like, put down the phone and fucking listen. Ask, how was your day? And really mean it. And don't take, oh, okay, well, how did your day make you feel? There's different ways to ask the question. But just listening, pouring a glass of wine and saying, hey, I just want to hear about your day. That's actually easy. That's easier than going to fix the toilet, right? Or trying to be a hero and do all these things for your spouse. Just listen. And I didn't get through the whole women's book, but I'm sure, Brian, that's probably in there as well, where you're asking her to just stop doing whatever she's doing and listen. Is that accurate?
It is. There's definitely a dichotomy between the two books. But the chapter you're speaking about is that I thought my life was way more important than hers because I was the one doing stuff. I mean, all she was doing was just, raising our 2 sons, keeping a wonderful home, cooking dinner, making sure everything. No, that's not all she was doing. She was doing equally what I was doing, if not more. And I didn't realize that. So when she was talking, all I was doing is thinking of what I was going to say next. And I wasn't listening.
When you're writing the book, are you putting yourself in the space of, I think these are the things I could have done to save my marriage?
Absolutely. My book is a letter to men who are trying to save their marriage. And it's a letter also to men who are going to get married on how to, maintain a healthy relationship and keep a positive attitude and to love their wife the way they loved them from the very first day that they met them and formed that beautiful relationship up until, death do them part.
What's your wife think? Your ex-wife think of the book, your former spouse? She read it?
Yeah, she's read it. I think she liked the one about how not to be an a-hole husband better than the one about how not to be an a-hole wife.
Fair point,
But once I wrote this first book, then I came up with, okay, this book is a book for dummies. I can literally write about anything. But how am I going to get these husbands to read this book other than put it on the coffee table and say, haha, look at this funny book title. So that's what inspired me to write the wife's version, because when she brings the book home to her husband, she goes, oh, and honey, by the way, I have one for me too. So you can read your version. I can read my version, because I think we should both together learn on how to become better people together.
So, Brian, when we were talking about having you on the show and we get this book, Pete did something that I didn't know that he does when he goes to Google reviews. And I thought it was very interesting. He starts by reading the 1-star reviews.
Have you read your 1-star reviews?
I read all my reviews. I do. And the 1-star review on the wife book is hilarious.
I haven't gotten to the wife book one. My favorite are always the Amazon customer 1-star. I haven't tried it. I think that in spite of those real contribution to intellectual rigor of Amazon, there is one that I'm curious if you could talk about, and it's somebody who doesn't like the book, and I'm not asking you to defend the book in any way. I just think that we can. It might be an opportunity to frame it in a way for people who have yet to read the book. This is a review that says, I bought this book for my husband. I couldn't give it to him because I was embarrassed. The content is useless. The language is awful. And it carries a sexist theme throughout the pages. Make dinner for her once a week. Help her with the dishes. WTF, this isn't 1950. And it's that mentality which is perpetuating inequality of the sexes. No. We swear like sailors around here. We have no problem with the language, but the the issue with the perpetuating stereotypes in examples that you give. Is that something that you reflect on as you're writing the book, or that you've reflected on since?
I can understand where she's coming from, where she's like, this guy is here. So she turned it on me a little bit.
She did.
Yeah, she turned it on me. What I meant to say was, take the things that she's doing and maybe you do it for her every once in a while.
Brian, that's very interesting that you say that, because Pete before the show said, Seth, I start with this 1-star reviews. I thought that was just funny, and he read it. And I said that exact same thing in a different way. I said, when I'm explaining legal concepts to people or anything, it's a way to communicate the concept is to give a stereotypical view, because people get the stereotype. Not that it's appropriate, not that it's accurate, not that it is the way things should be, but it is a way to convey the information. So when we talk about alimony a lot, we might say, I'll say, sorry to be stereotypical, but if the wife is receiving alimony, the former wife is receiving alimony, which is stereotypical, the man made the money, now has to pay it to the former spouse. That's not in every case by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a way to get the concept going. And when I read your book, I definitely saw where a critique would be, well, look, it's very 50-ish, do the dishes, do this. But when I read it, I actually said, what Brian is telling me is whatever something she is doing that is deemed a chore, take that chore on for her as a way to show that you appreciate her and giving her the night off or the day off or whatever the case may be. Now, I will tell you that my cousin's wife mows the lawn. I actually think she's afraid he'll hurt himself, But for example, that might be something that he might do for her to give her the break. Now, I think she loves being out there doing it, and that's one of the reasons they do it. But all relationships, duties do get divided, right? It's just the way we work together. And Pete, we've talked about this before. Someone will pay the bills. The other one will go to the grocery store. My aunt used to make the grocery list and my uncle would go to the store. So it's all just how you guys work. So is that what you were kind of saying, Brian, is whatever the chore might be, take it on for that spouse?
100%. And what I did learn is from this book is that, people can take your words and turn it around on you. But at the end of the day, you know where your heart was coming from and what you were saying. And I would say that most people take your perspective. If he's just, trying to make some sense out of it into terms where everybody can understand. Yeah,
most people. We start with the 1 stars, but the book has some extraordinarily strong 4 and 5 star reviews from people who are using this, like they're trying it and it's helping their marriages, right? It's helping them to your point, Seth, it's helping them learn the love language of their spouse, right? Of their partner, how to just be a more generous and joyous partner in the relationship. And I think that's a pretty special thing to have contributed to the world. And so, like if you have not read it yet, please take it with that. This is a language that I think speaks to in the way sort of men think and speak, to a way that really attaches their head to heart.
I mean, he lays it out there. He'll say, quit being an idiot, right? He'll drop the F-bomb, no problem, right? He'll talk about sex. But on that note, he says, kiss your wife, kiss her neck. Like when you first started dating, you didn't just go have straight sex, right? There was something called foreplay, right? But Brian says it in such a way, like, don't forget what got you here. Don't forget all those times when you were courting each other. So
there's that bit. He says, kiss her sexy mouth. And I'm reading that and I'm not divorced. I've been married for 20 years. And I'm thinking, gosh, she does have a sexy mouth. I think I'm sitting reading this book and I kind of want to go kiss it. Like, it's actually awesome. I want to go treat her better as a result of reading his divorce porn.
When you read this book, though, the chapters are all of 2 pages. Yes. And so they're very just kind of step by step of, here's a quick topic. It might be adore her, or it might be affectionate in what she wants. It could be use kind words. It's all these little things that you can do. And none of them, frankly, take a lot of effort. And I would imagine that if people are implementing this, they're going to get a lot of positive feedback from their spouse, which then encourages the behavior, because we're all just trained animals, right? We just are on that hamster wheel. So,
and it is gritty, and I wanted to be gritty with my language. I wanted to be gritty with the sex, because you know what, marriage can get gritty. If you know me, you can hear these words just slip out from my mouth, which I put a pen to paper, as I mentioned before. So yeah, am I going to pull any punches the way I talk? No. Are people going to relate to me with the way I talk? Yes. Is it going to offend some people? Probably. But I was okay with that, because you can tell the spirit of these books is to be helpful, kind, caring, loving, giving, all these types of things you want to be in a relationship.
I do have a question about day 28, and this is don't compartmentalize. The reason I'm asking about this is I have in my job to deal with some very difficult situations sometimes. I have to deal with domestic violence issues with clients, with children being put in very compromising situations and being physically and sexually abused. And I have to deal with those types of issues. And my girlfriend will tell me, I will ask about your day, but if it's something that's really bad like that, she actually doesn't want to hear about that because it's so upsetting to her. So I do compartmentalize. I'll talk to her. She'll say, "How was your day?" And I'll be, "It's one of those days that I can't talk to you about." You don't want to hear it. And I respect that, because these are tough things. If you're a police officer on the murder beat, you don't necessarily want to come home and talk about the murder that you saw that day or had to investigate, right? So can you just kind of talk through that a little bit? Because I felt like the don't compartmentalize. I thought that less like TV dinners and more like pot pies was a great example. But can you just kind of talk us through that one part?
Sure. I have learned to, and I was maybe talking about her a little bit in this, and then reflected on myself. And what you were talking about, yeah, you don't want to bring home the bad, especially if you've already talked with your spouse about, hey, I don't want to know that stuff. So you respect that. I try very hard, and that's why I am who I am in this book, that I'm going to talk to you the way I'm talking to my kid, or I'm going to talk to you the way I'm going to talk to a pastor or a lawyer or my wife or her mother or my mother. I pull no punches with my mother. My parents have read this book. They think it's horrifying and awful because of the language.
There's the 1-star reviews from Mom right there.
Found it.
Yeah, they don't get it. My dad gets it, but my mom is like, why do you have to use such horrible language? And I'm like, well, Mom, that's the way I fucking talk, And she gets it. She gets it and she respects it. But to compartmentalizing, it is almost impossible, but it's doable. And I think you can do it by just being your true self, no matter who you're talking to and no matter who you're around and what situation that you're in.
Gotcha. So be more true to yourself. Be who you are. Don't try to be one thing one place and one thing another. Now, we all have roles to play, right? Like, I appreciate that. Like, I've always talked to my son at an age appropriate level, but even sophisticated concepts, right?
Exactly. True. Yeah.
I'm with you.
So that's what I was trying to share in that. Also, people compartmentalize and just hide it away. Let's just say, a married couple, the wife is cheating on her husband, and when she gets home, she puts it away. It didn't happen. It's gone. I compartmentalized it, and I don't go back into that compartment until I go back and do that horrible thing again. And that's another way to look at it.
As I read the book, and now having talked to you for a while, I absolutely can sort of feel you in the words on the page. How do you pivot that and now write from a perspective of the woman who doesn't want to be an a-hole wife?
Great question. Well, I try to put myself in their shoes, but I think it was harder to write how not to be an a-hole husband because it's really looking into myself. It's hard to look, in the mirror sometimes, but how to not be an a-hole wife. Oh, I got a lot of advice, ladies, for you, and I think I do it in such a way where I'm not being mean. I'm just saying, hey, this is what I would like to see in my future wife and my future relationship. So I kind of felt like the second book was a little bit easier. And there's actually a third and fourth book too. There's, how not to be an a-hole boyfriend and lose your girlfriend, and the other one that goes with that.
Man, it's the whole a-hole series. It's like an a-hole cinematic universe.
Like I mentioned before, like a book for dummies, because the next book I'm writing is how not to be an a-hole boss and lose your employees, and how not to be an a-hole employee and lose your job.
Look at you. That's fantastic.
That's really, I mean, what I just found interesting specifically, Brian, about what you said is how it's easier to write about the other spouse, because it's almost like you're complaining, right? Yeah. And in what I do, people will call, and I think this is a mistake when dealing with your lawyer. They will call and they will want to tell me all about their spouse and all the bad things their spouse does. And I want them to focus on them and what is their life going to be like during this process of divorce? What is their life going to look like after divorce? There is a time and a place to talk about the behaviors of the spouse when it comes to how that fits into the law and how that's going to divide assets if someone was hiding money, how it comes for parenting kids if they're just never around, or the way they deal with the children isn't appropriate, or the way they feed them. All these things. There is a time for that, but that is not the time. And the first conversation is to talk to a lawyer and complain about your spouse, because you're not getting any real information about the law or how this process works. So I know Pete has some questions for you about how you've written this book, which was reflective after divorce, but how was the actual process of divorce, right, Pete?
So we would like to turn our attention now to your divorce process, if you're comfortable talking about it. What was it like working with your lawyer?
I actually did not use a lawyer.
Brian, come on. God, I thought things were going so well between us. Brutal.
Well, we were like separated for almost, 2 years. And in that 2-year process, like I just shut down. I stopped wanting to work. I stopped wanting to bring in money. Then we were faced with like a bankruptcy. So then I was thinking, usually, the wife gets half of everything that the man has brought in. And I thought,
because
perfect.
That's not sexist, right? Right.
And at the time I was thinking, perfect. She can have half of everything that I have, which is absolutely fucking nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's why I had the response, or I'll even say reaction, because I didn't give it any thought, is first off, in Florida, and check your local jurisdiction, you don't need a lawyer to get a divorce. Okay. At all. Florida law, you can go in there without lawyers, and you can reach a settlement agreement without lawyers. You can reach a settlement agreement without knowing what the law is. There are websites from the clerk of the courts that will give you all the forms to fill out. The reason why I have the response that I have is I think making informed decisions are important. It's not a lawyer's job to tell a client, don't enter into this agreement. It's a lawyer's job to say, it is your choice whether you want to enter in this agreement or not, but the law would give you more, or the law wouldn't require you to do this or that. But I believe in self-determination. I think clients get to make their decisions. It's their farm to give away, in quotes. If they want to give the farm away, they can give it away. I just think they should be informed. And what always does make me nervous is when there is an agreement, you're basically creating a contract. And it makes me nervous if that has to come back to court and we're going to have to say, what did we mean? What does it say? How does it work? Those are the things that give me pause. But I do appreciate the sentiment of the scariness of dealing with a lawyer, or like in Brian's case, look, we've been separated for 2 years. What's left to do? Let's just get this done. So that's just my knee-jerk reaction. But I do not mean to diminish Brian's right or his own choice of, you know what, we didn't want to deal with lawyers. I get it.
It's expensive. It's expensive to go down that road. I did try to go down that road, and just talking to a lawyer is expensive. I got the information that I needed that I learned from Uncle Google, and matched it and paralleled what they were saying versus Uncle Google.
Now you're really killing me.
There's a shiv involved.
My hard work in law school and my bar license with a Google search. My cousin has a mug. He's a doctor. He says, don't replace my medical degree with Google. And here I am having Brian on the show to say, call Uncle Google.
Yeah, you know what? Some people don't even know how to use a computer, so I think you're in good shape still.
You're in good shape, right? You're okay. Well, in all seriousness, Brian, I really appreciate that you went down this road, the two of you on your own, and from the perspective of being in a dark place. How did it? She served you. How did that all unravel? And just in short strokes, how did it come apart for you?
So during that time, I was making a feature. I was producing feature films 1 year after the other, and living in Hollywood and living a very fast life. You have to be on your toes and know what the heck is going on at all times. And when all this happened, I wanted to leave. I wanted to take my children away from that environment because it was already dark and gloomy already. I can always go back in the movie business, but what I can't do is have this time with my children who are now 17 and 14. Again, that was 7 years ago. They were little. So I'll never regret leaving Los Angeles because I know Los Angeles isn't going anywhere. What I would have regretted is of going through these dark times and trying to grasp onto everything that I could in Hollywood while losing time raising my boys. And by moving from Los Angeles to where I live now, it slowed my life down completely. It helped me get a grasp, helped me write these books with no distractions. And I got to raise my boys and I'll have no regrets with doing that.
That makes absolute sense to me. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from that perspective, Brian, is slow down. If you want more time with your children, put down your cell phone. Be engaged. Be present. Even some of the stuff in the book that you talk about, like, hey, make dinner with your spouse and how romantic that can be. You can cook with your children, get them involved. That those type of activities that you're discussing in your life is general. Like you eliminated the hustle and bustle and the craziness of LA and being in the movie business to kind of slow down and focus on the kids. But even if you are in the hustle and bustle of your life, you can still make the deliberate decision to slow down and be present where you are at that moment. And that is going to not just impact your relationship with your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your children. It's going to help you be more centered because those are the things that ultimately we find important.
100%.
This is great. You guys, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. I think in spite of the fact that you didn't use an attorney on a show about divorce attorneys, we deeply appreciate the contributions you're making
now
to people.
With all these books taken off and he's be rolling in dough, he'll be calling for a prenup. That's when he's coming up next. So I still got my chance there. Still got my chance.
Haven't missed it.
Nailed it. But would you give us a plug? Where would you like people to go learn more? I can't believe it. I am dutifully embarrassed about not picking up on the other books, A Boyfriend, Girlfriend, and The Boss Thing coming. Where do you want people to go learn more about this stuff?
We have a Facebook page. We're almost at 40,000 followers over the last few years, which is pretty cool. And then all the books are on Amazon. So if you Google my first and last name on Amazon, the books will pop up. And there's links all over Facebook, also on the like page.
Perfect. All those links will be in the show notes. Seth, how do you feel? Did you learn something today?
I did. I learned a lot from Brian. I learned a lot from reading his book. I certainly connected with some of the different chapters. And Brian, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to write this book and be self-reflective and basically lay out to the world, hey, these are some mistakes that I might have made and don't make the same ones. That's really giving back. And I think if you're picking up the book and you're reading it from that perspective of someone that's gone through a divorce, or if you've gone through it and you want to be like, hey, what can I learn about what I did in a very simple, easy read, then I really strongly recommend picking up these books and not just reading them, but putting them into practice. So, Brian, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We sure appreciate you showing up and doing the work. On behalf of Brian Ronalds and the esteemed Seth Nelson, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week right here on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships.
Seth Nelson is an attorney with Nelson Coster Family Law and Mediation, with offices in Tampa, Florida. While we may be discussing family law topics, How to Split a Toaster is not intended to, nor is it providing legal advice. Every situation is different. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, please seek your own legal counsel with an attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. Pete Wright is not an attorney or employee of Nelson Coster. Seth Nelson is licensed to practice law in Florida.